Something happens about 20 minutes after you eat a banana. Not something you'd notice, nothing dramatic. But inside your digestive tract, inside your bloodstream, inside the walls of your arteries, a sequence of biological events is already in motion that is quietly, incrementally, doing something useful for your body. This happens every time. The banana doesn't know how often you eat it. It just does what it does, delivers what it carries, activates what it activates, and moves through your system, leaving a set of measurable effects behind. What are those effects exactly? What does daily banana consumption, specifically one banana, every day, consistently, actually do to a body over 60 across the span of days, weeks, and months of that consistency? That's today's question. And the answer is more specific, more mechanistically interesting, and in a couple of places more clinically significant than most people expect when they think about fruit. Let's start with what a banana actually is. A medium-ripe banana, the standard, slightly spotty yellow variety most people eat, delivers approximately 105 calories, 27 grams of carbohydrate, 3 grams of fiber, 422 milligrams of potassium, 32 milligrams of magnesium, 0.43 milligrams of vitamin B6, 10 milligrams of vitamin C, and roughly 9 milligrams of tryptophan per 100 grams. It also contains small amounts of folate, riboflavin, and a compound called dopamine. It also contains small amounts of folate, riboflavin, and a compound called dopamine. Each of these components does something distinct, and the daily consistency of delivering all of them together is what makes the banana worth examining as a health habit rather than simply a convenient snack. The potassium story is where most of the clinically significant action happens, and it deserves real time. Sodium is its extracellular counterpart. The balance between intracellular potassium and extracellular sodium determines, moment by moment, the electrical gradient across cell membranes that makes nerve signaling and muscle contraction possible. Every heartbeat, every muscle movement, every nerve signal traveling through your body is powered by the sodium-potassium ATPase pump, an enzyme embedded in cell membranes that continuously moves 3 sodium ions out of the cell and 2 potassium ions in, maintaining the electrochemical gradient that makes cellular communication possible. Maintaining the electrochemical gradient that makes cellular communication possible. Maintaining the electrochemical gradient that makes cellular communication possible. This is not background biology. This is the mechanism that connects potassium intake to blood pressure, and the connection is more direct and more powerful than most people realize. The kidneys regulate blood pressure partly by controlling how much sodium they retain in the body. When sodium retention is high, blood volume increases, blood pressure rises. Potassium directly modulates this process. Adequate potassium stimulates the kidneys to excrete more sodium, reducing blood volume and consequently blood pressure. The relationship is dose dependent. More dietary potassium, more renal sodium excretion, lower blood pressure. A 2013 meta-analysis published in the BMJ, analyzing data from 33 randomized controlled trials, found that increased potassium intake produced a statistically significant reduction in systolic blood pressure, averaging 3.49 mmol, and diastolic blood pressure averaging 1.96 mmol in adults with hypertension. A 2020 Cochrane review confirmed these findings across a larger evidence base. 3.5 millimeters of mercury systolic may sound modest, written as a number. In the context of blood pressure management at the population level, it is clinically meaningful, representing a reduction in stroke risk of approximately 8 to 10%, and in coronary heart disease risk of approximately 5 to 7% based on established risk reduction models. One medium banana provides 422 milligrams of potassium. The adequate intake for potassium in adults is 2,600 milligrams per day for women and 3,400 milligrams for men. Most American adults consume approximately 2,300 milligrams per day, below the adequate intake threshold regardless of sex. The daily banana provides roughly 13 to 16% of the adequate intake, making it a meaningful contribution to closing a potassium gap that the vast majority of older adults are living with without knowing it. For adults over 60 with hypertension, one of the most prevalent conditions in this age group, the potassium from a daily banana is not trivial. It is a consistent, daily antihypertensive input delivered through food, not pharmacology, through a mechanism that is not a replacement for appropriate medication when medication is indicated. But that represents a genuine additive contribution to blood pressure management that compounds over months of consistency. The heart rhythm relevance of potassium is also worth stating directly. Atrial fibrillation, the most common cardiac arrhythmia in older adults, affecting approximately 10% of adults over 65, has documented associations with hypokalemia, the clinical term for low potassium. The electrical stability of cardiac cells depends on adequate intracellular potassium. When potassium is insufficient, the threshold for abnormal electrical firing decreases and arrhythmic events become more likely. Maintaining adequate dietary potassium intake is not a treatment for atrial fibrillation, but it is a component of the physiological environment in which cardiac electrical stability is either better or worse supported. 90 minutes after the banana. The resistant starch it contained, more abundant in less ripe, firmer bananas, present in meaningful amounts even in ripe ones, has now reached the large intestine largely undigested. This is not a failure of digestion. It is the point. Resistant starch is a prebiotic, a substrate that feeds specific bacterial populations in the colon that, when well nourished, produce short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These short-chain fatty acids are the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining the large intestine, and are among the most important molecules in the body for maintaining the integrity of the intestinal barrier. Regulating systemic inflammation, modulating insulin sensitivity, and influencing the HPA axis through the gut-brain pathway. Butyrate specifically has anti-inflammatory properties that are relevant at the level of the colonic mucosa. It suppresses NF-κB activation in colonocytes, reducing the local inflammatory signaling that, when chronic, contributes to colorectal disease risk. A 2017 review in the journal Current Colorectal Cancer Reports summarized the evidence for butyrate's role in colorectal cancer prevention through these mechanisms, noting that the fermentation of dietary resistant starch to butyrate represents one of the most plausible nutritional mechanisms for the protective dietary fiber effect on colorectal cancer risk observed in epidemiological studies. The microbiome response to consistent daily resistant starch delivery accumulates over approximately 2 to 4 weeks of daily intake. The bacterial populations that ferment resistant starch, primarily Bifidobacterium and certain Lactobacillus species, increase in relative abundance in response to consistent substrate availability. The microbiome response to consistent daily resistant starch delivery accumulates over approximately 2 to 4 weeks of daily intake. A 2011 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that daily consumption of resistant starch over 4 weeks produced measurable increases in Bifidobacterium populations in the gut microbiome of healthy adults, with corresponding increases in butyrate production. The less ripe the banana, the more resistant starch it contains. A just ripe banana with some green still at the ends has substantially more resistant starch than a fully ripe, deeply spotted banana. But for those specifically interested in the prebiotic effect, a banana on the firmer side of ripe delivers more resistant starch per serving. By the end of the first week of daily consumption, several things are occurring simultaneously. This is not yet measurable on a home blood pressure cuff. The physiological adaptation takes longer than 7 days to reach its full expression, but the biochemical preconditions for that adaptation are being established daily. The consistent daily B6 and tryptophan delivery is supporting the neurotransmitter synthesis pathways that are among the most nutritionally sensitive in the brain. Vitamin B6, pyridoxal phosphate in its active form, is the cofactor required for the conversion of tryptophan to 5-hydroxytryptophan, the immediate precursor to serotonin. It is also required for the synthesis of GABA from glutamate and for the conversion of DOPA to dopamine. These are not peripheral biochemical footnotes. Resistant starch is a prebiotic, a substrate that feeds specific bacterial populations in the colon that, when well nourished, produce short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, and acetate. B6 deficiency, which is considerably more common in adults over 60 than in younger populations, due both to reduced dietary intake and to age-related reductions in the efficiency of B6 conversion to its active form. These short-chain fatty acids are the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining the large intestine, and are among the most important molecules in the body for maintaining the integrity of the intestinal barrier. A daily banana provides approximately 20% of the recommended daily intake of B6, a meaningful contribution, particularly in the context of an aging population with demonstrably lower average B6 status. The relationship between consistent B6 intake and cognitive function in older adults has been examined in multiple studies. A 2012 meta-analysis in the European Journal of Nutrition found that higher B6 status was associated with better cognitive performance in older adults, with the association strongest for memory and processing speed, the domains most sensitive to the neurotransmitter synthesis pathways for which B6 serves as a cofactor. 1 month in, 1 month of consistency. The blood pressure effect of consistent potassium intake is now measurable in many people. A 2015 randomized controlled trial in hypertensive adults found that 4 weeks of increased potassium intake through dietary modification produce the reductions in blood pressure consistent with the meta-analytic findings I described. Not dramatic, not pharmaceutical, but real and consistent across the group. The gut microbiome has shifted. The bifidobacterium and butyrate-producing populations supported by the resistant starch have established themselves more robustly in the microbial community. The blood pressure effect of consistent potassium intake is now measurable in many people. A 2015 randomized controlled trial in hypertensive adults found that 4 weeks of increased potassium intake through dietary modification produced the reductions in blood pressure consistent with the meta-analytic findings I described. Sleep quality for many people who were previously mildly B6 insufficient has quietly improved. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself. But the combination of better GABA synthesis support, more consistent serotonin and melatonin precursor availability, and the magnesium content of the banana, which as I described in a previous video supports both GABA receptor function and the downregulation of the HPA axis that enables sleep transitions, creates a biochemical environment modestly more supportive of sleep architecture than was present before the daily banana became routine. The magnesium contribution deserves a separate moment. One banana provides approximately 32 milligrams of magnesium. The recommended daily allowance for adults over 60 is 420 milligrams for men and 320 milligrams for women. A banana alone delivers a modest fraction of that. But in a population where magnesium deficiency is common, driven by reduced absorption, diuretic use, and inadequate dietary variety, the consistent daily contribution from a banana is one tile in a mosaic. That collectively determines whether magnesium status reaches the threshold for functional adequacy in the enzymatic processes that depend on it. Insulin signaling, muscle contraction and relaxation, DNA repair, protein synthesis, and the GABA receptor modulation that I mentioned in the sleep context. The effect that is perhaps the most interesting and the least discussed about consistent banana consumption is what has been happening to kidney stone risk. Most kidney stones, approximately 80%, are calcium oxalate stones. Their formation depends on several factors, including urine pH, urine calcium concentration, and the concentration of oxalate and citrate in the urine. Citrate is protective. It binds calcium in the urine and inhibits the crystallization that produces stones. Potassium citrate is a pharmaceutical treatment for kidney stones specifically because it increases urinary citrate excretion and alkalinizes the urine in ways that reduce stone formation risk. Dietary potassium from food sources, including bananas, increases urinary citrate excretion through the same mechanism, albeit less potently than pharmacological potassium citrate. A 2014 study in the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that higher dietary potassium intake from food was associated with significantly lower kidney stone incidence over a multi-year follow-up period in a large prospective cohort. A 2014 study in the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that higher dietary potassium intake from food was associated with significantly lower kidney stone incidence over a multi-year follow-up period in a large prospective cohort. For adults over 60 who have a history of kidney stones or who have been told they are at elevated risk, the consistent daily potassium from a banana is a food-sourced contribution to the same biological pathway that their urologist may be managing pharmacologically. It does not replace clinical management of recurrent or symptomatic kidney stone disease. It is a dietary input that works in the right direction. Now, the honest qualifications, because there are real situations in which the daily banana habit requires more careful consideration. For adults with chronic kidney disease at any stage, potassium management is a medical priority that supersedes general nutritional guidance. The kidneys of a person with reduced kidney function cannot excrete potassium efficiently, and dietary potassium that is entirely safe in a person with normal kidney function can accumulate to dangerous levels, producing hyperkalemia, a condition of elevated serum potassium that can cause cardiac arrhythmia, in someone with significantly reduced glomerular filtration rate. If you have been told you have chronic kidney disease, if your eGFR is below 60, or if your physician has told you to watch your potassium intake, the specific potassium guidance regarding bananas must come from your physician or renal dietitian, not from this video or any general nutritional content. For adults taking potassium-sparing diuretics, spironolactone, amiloride, triamterene, or ACE inhibitors and ARBs, which reduce urinary potassium excretion as part of their mechanism of action, the combined effect of these medications and high dietary potassium warrants physician awareness. Most adults taking these medications can continue eating bananas without concern, but the total dietary potassium picture is part of what their physician should be monitoring through periodic serum potassium measurement. And if that monitoring is not happening, it's worth raising. For adults managing diabetes with insulin or insulin secretagogues, sulfonylureas, the carbohydrate content of a banana, at approximately 27 grams per medium fruit, is meaningful in the context of total daily carbohydrate management. The glycemic index of a ripe banana is moderate rather than high. The fiber and resistant starch components slow glucose absorption compared to equivalent free glucose, but it is not a free food from a glycemic standpoint. A less ripe banana has a lower glycemic index than a fully ripe one, which is a relevant practical distinction for individuals monitoring postprandial glucose closely. What the daily banana is not. It is not a cure for any condition. It is not a substitute for medications that have been prescribed for blood pressure, heart rhythm, kidney stones, or any other condition. It is not sufficient on its own to correct significant B6 or magnesium deficiency if those deficiencies are severe. And it is not a special or uniquely powerful food in the sense of containing compounds unavailable from other fruits and vegetables. Many of the benefits I described are achievable from a broader dietary pattern rich in fruits, vegetables, and whole foods generally. And the banana is one contributor to that pattern rather than a uniquely essential one. It is not a cure for any condition. It is not a substitute for medications that have been prescribed for blood pressure, heart rhythm, kidney stones, or any other condition. It is a convenient, affordable, widely available, genuinely nutritious food that delivers a specific set of nutrients: potassium, magnesium, B6, resistant starch, tryptophan, in biologically meaningful quantities through mechanisms that are well characterized and relevant to the specific health concerns most prevalent in adults over 60. Eaten daily and consistently, it makes a real contribution to blood pressure, gut microbiome diversity, neurotransmitter synthesis, sleep support, and kidney stone risk reduction, not through any single dramatic mechanism, but through the accumulation of modest, consistent biological inputs in a body that responds to what it receives every day. That is the honest, evidence-grounded summary of what happens when you eat one banana every day. Not magical, not trivial either. Just biology doing what biology does, quietly, consistently, in response to what you give it. If this reframed a food you have been eating without quite knowing why it was worth eating, or gave you a reason to add it to a morning routine that currently doesn't include it, hit the like button right now. It tells this platform that specific, mechanism-grounded nutritional information for adults over 60 deserves to reach everyone who would benefit from it. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every week there is one video here that does exactly this, takes a food, a symptom, a habit, or a biological process, and explains it with the specificity and honesty it deserves. Leave me a comment with this. Do you currently eat bananas regularly? And if so, do you tend toward riper or firmer ones? That detail, how ripe the banana, is actually biologically relevant in ways that most people haven't considered. Write it below. I read every comment and I respond when I can. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every week there is one video here that does exactly this, takes a food, a symptom, a habit, or a biological process, and explains it with the specificity and honesty it deserves. The electrical stability of cardiac cells depends on adequate intracellular potassium. When potassium is insufficient, the threshold for abnormal electrical firing decreases and arrhythmic events become more likely. Creates a biochemical environment modestly more supportive of sleep architecture than was present before the daily banana became routine.